On to the big issue of Hawke's Bay is the cyclone recovery, and how a lot of people have different opinions of how it's been handled and that. There has been a lot of criticism, Mark, of the way Labour government has handled it. You speak to different sectors. The orchardists weren't particularly happy how they were handled. People who live in Category 3 homes are not really happy about the way things are being done there. What do you say about that?
So the first thing I'd say is that, it was a catastrophic weather event spread across, a very wide area, and that people have been hit hard. And, my heart goes out to people. I mean, I know people that were personally affected, and it's been awful. I'd say that in terms of the government's response, we're up to nearly $1 billion of investment in Hawke's Bay now in cyclone recovery. The local councils and regional council all said unanimously with one voice, we don't want government to impose this on us. We want you to walk alongside us and support a locally led recovery. I think there's been some learnings in that. So it was kind of like doing the opposite of the Sarah approach in Christchurch. I would argue that you need to take, because this is precedent setting, because of the scale of it and the future implications for retreat, the land decisions need to be got right. I know somebody personally who I went to school with who lives in Pakawai, whose property has gone in and out of 2 and 3 and is now back in 2. There's big decisions to be taken around, whether we create floodplains, whether we change where stop banks are or raise them. And those take time because
But these are people's lives. If you're living in your mother-in-law's house or in a caravan somewhere,
I absolutely appreciate that.
This is your life that we're talking about.
Of all of the post-weather event recovery areas, Hawke's Bay is actually going the fastest. And if you look at where, say, somewhere like Christchurch would have been this far after the major earthquake, it took years to sort out some of the land zoning decisions. So it's not been perfect. I think that there's, for example, there's a big review of civil defence because civil defence is also run locally. And
there are two reviews. There's a local review and a national review. Yeah,
that's right. So there's a bunch of learning that needs to happen out of this, and we learned, I guess, the government of both colours learnt a lot from the Christchurch, how to deal with a massive earthquake. Now we need to learn, because these things are going to get more frequent, and I guess that it's certainly not the time to be taking money out of the Climate Resilience Fund to give to wealthy landlords. It's just not.
Well, we'll get on to the whole climate change thing. I see Martin rolling his eyes.
Yes, I will.
That Cyclone Gabriel is climate change, but we will get on to that. But what do you think could have been done differently, Martin, in the recovery?
It's the comment that the central government was going to let the local government have more control and walk with them. The money. It was the money that was the problem because the local council saying we haven't got the facilities, we haven't got the resources, and central government said, oh, we'll just let you muddle it out basically. So you had a lot of delays and such forth, and the councils that couldn't actually cope with it because the government wasn't giving them enough support.
Do you think that was a tactic by the central government just to pass the buck to
with
the
all
local?
due respect, Whakatahi did a pretty good job of getting the roads up and running, I thought.
But that's central though. You're talking about having this localised, and Martin's point is having localised. You can't say, hey local, you deliver it, but we're not going to tell you how much money we're going to give you until another month and another month and a month. You can't drip feed it.
He helped with a lot of roads that weren't their responsibility because they abutted to state highways. I mean, you can't say the government did nothing.
Why are we still waiting for $12 million they were promised?
I think what we've learned is that there's a
rates.
capability missing.
Okay, we'll get back to Martin.
There we go. So I had a colleague who was an architect. And he said that it was quite an easy thing to have looked at where the flood. He said even the next day you could have looked at that footage and said this is where the floodplains are out in Eskdale, and this is where this is the high tide line basically of where the flooding is. There were decisions that could have been made way back then, but instead the people have been put through. We're having a meeting in 6 weeks.
What decisions would have been made?
Whether you're going to be a 2 or a 3, because there were people out there who were living in their houses and had knock on the door saying, you've got to get out and you've got to evacuate. And said, well, the water's gone down. The water's receded. Our houses are, no, you are classed as a zone 3, you've got to get out. And this is their personal experience. And they said, well, we're refusing to move. If we refuse to move, are we in trouble? Well, there'll be someone back to see you. They stayed in their house. Their house did not get flooded. Their land off the road. They were off the road and they were unflooded. So you've got silly decisions going on. People going around doing admin that wasn't really helpful for people. You put people in risk and say, well, where do we go? We're going to leave our property. We're leaving our other properties there. We're taking the people who are renting with us. Where do we go? And so you got people making silly decisions. No one was really taking control. You had the hubs who were run by volunteers who did a fantastic job. And then you had people saying, oh, we'll get the outside guys and you go in there and you sort out the civilians. Now, I know this Australian team came in, started talking to the guys out at Bayview, and they said, you carry on, because you're actually doing a really good job here. And so they said, you carry on because this is fantastic. And what the council worker did came in and said, oh, you can't be putting those names in a bin because that's privacy issues. You've got to have a shredder to put those. And he said, I don't think these families that here, here and here that I've just put in the bin matter 2 jots about their names being on a piece of paper. That's how nitpicky the council had been. This is how stupid it can get when in a situation where there's stress.
Okay, Julian, what do you think could have been done better in the recovery?
I'm sure lots could have been done better, and I'm sure there will be a review to tell that. In terms of the initial thing, and given the scale of the problem and how unexpected it was, I think that communities, councils and the government actually did a reasonably good job. I do understand that for individual people who are still waiting for things to happen, they will look back and say, but this didn't happen, that didn't happen. So I'm looking forward to an actual independent review coming out that looks at all of these things and says, well, what could we have been done better in order to meet things for the future? And a couple of things I'd like to say, I mean, actually, you said we're going to get back to this, is about actually building more resilience for the future, but we're going to come back to that, I believe.
Come back to that.
And the other thing, as part of that, is there are a huge number of decisions to be made, and you can't rush them. Things like, you know, where you're going to rebuild, are you going to rebuild, zoning, all of that needs really careful thought. It can't be rushed, so we need to take the time we need. And I understand that for individual people who have lost things, and I happen to know quite a lot of them as well, it's frustrating, and I'm sure that more can be done for the individuals in that situation, but I wouldn't want to rush into any knee-jerk reaction in terms of the longer-term planning.
Now, Laurie, the key to all this is money.
Yes.
Wairau needs a ton load of money
Yes.
to get back
And we've
on
invested
its
a lot
feet
in
and that.
Wairau.
Yes.
So what more can be done, do you think?
Well, I
Where's
guess
this money come
it's
from?
one of these things that, when it happens, you just go, oh my God, what is this? So again, it's about being ready for these things, but this sort of stuff, it's just difficult because it's so big, it came so fast and so strong. And Craig was telling me, the Mayor of Wairau, obviously you just got to get things done. You can't sit around thinking, oh, I've got to talk to this guy. They had a lot of stuff that was in place. Of course, it's the community. They've worked through a lot of different events in the past, but this was such a major event that it was just, God, it was just overwhelming. The thing is now, that work is being done. It's just slowly ticking over. And as I said, you need to have a look at how we can do things better in the future. The biggest thing with Craig was that they had to spend money to get things done. It was a discussion between them and the regional council, and now the money's not coming. And Wairau District Council now owes over $12 million. And they still have to pay that off, and they don't have the money to pay it. Yeah. So it's just a matter of streamlining the support and the finances after these things happen. Okay, you can look back and think we could have done this, they could have helped, they could have done this better, but it's the funding and the communication, telling people what's going on, when we're going to do it, not just to say at a meeting, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They need timelines. They need to know when things are going to be done.
Katie, I'm sure you've got a lot to say on what the government has done wrong.
Well, look, and you know what, most importantly, I have made it my job to connect with communities. So it's not just about saying, oh, I know someone personally that's been affected. My job as a representative is to connect with the people that are suffering and make sure I'm hearing them because they don't feel heard. And yes, we have 2 reviews, but only one of them is actually going to listen to the people. And that is the first issue. So, look, I think going back to how things were done in the immediate aftermath, that has been done. We can do a lot to learn from that. We can do a lot to make sure we do it better next time, and we can get to that when the time is right, you know, once the review is done. However, when we're talking about people's very real issues right now, and I'm talking to them all the time, we are constantly in touch. They need to be heard, and they aren't. And so we want to introduce a tool, a vehicle for their case to be heard, because you can't just arbitrarily draw a line.
Vehicle?
So that's an ombudsman.
It's just
so
more
Isn't
bureaucracy.
that just another bureaucracy?
No, look, it's not.
but
It's
Act
an
wants to get rid of
independent reviewing
bureaucracy.
body, because at the moment, the ombudsman that exists, there is currently a 5-year wait time to have your case seen. So we need to introduce that, because unfortunately,
This will slow
the power has
decision-making
been
down.
given. The power has been given to regional councils, district councils, but funding is drip fed. So the councils can only do so much in what they've got to make sure they're making the best decision. I understand that,
This
but
will just
every
tie the
single
whole
property
process
is
up in red
different.
tape.
Every
Mark's
single
point,
property
will
is
this
different.
slow things down?
No,
will
it
slow
won't.
things. Yes,
But
it
because,
will.
no, because at the end of the day, these people will fight and fight and fight if they do not believe their voice is being heard. If they get an independent review that tells them, actually, this is the situation, this is the best possible outcome you can get, that is going to help things move along. Because
that's not
otherwise
helping
people
with a
who are
local
in
decision.
pain,
It's
who are
another Wellington
suffering, will
bureaucrat.
continue to beat a dead horse. We've got to help them get another opinion.
It's creating another Wellington bureaucracy, and
No,
that's not
it's
what we
not.
need.
Oh.
We need to support local leaders to make good decisions, consulting
But
with the
it's not
communities
working,
that
and
they're
they're
working
not
for.
consulting with the community, though.
Well, that's the
is
bit that
the
needs
point.
fixing. We don't need an ombudsman.
Quite right. But at the moment, what is happening is the government is drip feeding funding, but they are not listening to their community. And a perfect example is infrastructure funding. When they get emergency works, Waka Kotahi say, yep, we will give you the funding, but you can only use it to get the road back to exactly the condition it was in before. They cannot improve. And so back to the point of resilience, when this happens again, we have not done anything to make sure we are protecting ourselves for the next event. We are only just going back to what we
We had
had.
to get the roads up and running pretty quickly, and a Bailey Bridge was never going to be a permanent solution, right?
Now, Pavel, I mean, you're an engineer. There were some bridges that were 1 in 500 years, and they were gone. They were washed away like
Puketapu.
nothing. How do you
110
even
metres.
build up, how do you even get the infrastructure to a level where it stops events like
Well,
this?
it is obvious that climate change is real, and it is obvious that we need to build resilience into our infrastructure. And I think everybody agrees to that. The problem is
everyone,
that
but
at the
How will X
moment,
pay for that?
yes, the funding is the issue, and the councils don't have security of funding. So what we would do, we would share the GST with councils to make sure that they have a clear funding going forward, not just for tomorrow, but for the years to come.
And what would
to
be
plan
cut
the
when you took the
infrastructure,
GST away from
and
the...
also for the infrastructure that we can't afford, because the truth is that we are behind with infrastructure for various reasons. We would make a list of infrastructure that's going to be built, that is required to be built. Then on this list, we would look at what can be funded from the public funds, and the remainder would be open to contest by private investors through
So what,
private
you'd have
public
to pay a toll to get
partnerships.
to Wairau?
And we would build it as a toll road. Doesn't have to be a road.
No, no,
All
no.
kind of
How's that going to work for
infrastructure.
rural
Build their own
communities?
Well,
Because
it's
some of
going
the
to
most
work for rural
expensive roads
communities
are in
because
the
you're
rural
going to deliver
communities.
infrastructure faster. Of course, if you're building a toll road, you have to have an alternative road.
This
but
will be
there's
a
plenty
tax-
of
this will be a
places
tax on rural
where
New
this can
Zealand.
be
That's crazy.
introduced.
Ask
Well,
Wairau. Have you
it's
asked
better
Wairau?
No,
than you're
nobody's
talking.
been
You
to
talk
Wairau.
to the
With you
people
and
on the
Ants together,
ground.
they're gonna end up paying a lot
Everybody
more
is
for their
happy, Mark,
roads.
paying a little bit of a toll if they can have a first world road
So who-
built. And it doesn't mean
So who's
stopping
going to
building
own
the
the road,
roads.
Pavel? Who
Well,
will own
as
the
you
road?
know, the way private
Chinese.
public
The
partnership
Chinese will
works.
end up owning the road.
No,
I
not
think
Chinese.
we've found a point to agree
Actually,
on
New
here,
Zealand
No, it's
Super
not
Fund
acceptable.
is keen to invest in New
Losing our
Zealand
sovereignty now.
infrastructure. So how about that?
Christopher
And they will
Luxon
not
slipped on
own
this,
it
didn't he? He did mention that it might be
indefinitely. They will
Chinese
own it for a
investment.
finished period of time. After it's paid off, this road is going to become the normal state road. So it's very easy. The only
All of these
benefit
schemes
is that instead
involve
of building
adding
this
extra
road
costs.
in 30 years' time, you can build it tomorrow. It's very simple.
So do you know what's really interesting? I just want to go back to Cyclone Bowler. There is a brilliant photo of one of my dad's trucks parked right on the other side of the Wairoa River.
Where I was?
Where yeah, there you go. Laurie was there
I was
when the
there.
bridge had come down.
Yep.
Because the bridge was not built for what was needed. But they learnt. They rebuilt the bridge, and guess what? It didn't get washed out, this cyclone. And so we need to do things better than we have done before. And that goes back to my point that we cannot just say, here's enough funding just to scrape you by. We need to build in resilience. We need to build in resilience funding.
Which is
That's
why we've
really
built
important.
a resilience fund, which National's taking money
that's
from.
a
I'm just
provincial growth
really,
fund.
really pleased that everybody here, possibly except for Martin, who doesn't really believe that climate change is a
I
real
believe in
threat.
climate change, but not climate crisis and climate
Well, we're gonna-
hysteria. So
So
there
that
we go.
actually
We'll go with that.
everybody agrees that we need more money for resilience.
Yes.
Well, that was
So,
a provincial
Mark-
growth fund.
Mark,
We built the
you
Taradale
believe in
Stop Bank.
climate change. What
I'm a
needs-
scientist first and foremost,
What
Martin.
needs to be done? Because if you believe in climate change, you believe that this is going to happen more. We're going to have more of these weather
Well, it
events.
has been, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So if you look at the weather events from Nelson to Northland to Coromandel to Auckland to here, I mean, the speed of these weather events is picking up. We do need to be doing two things. We need to be, we have to play our part in trying to mitigate climate change getting worse, and we have to play our part in adaptation. And you know, it's not the time to be robbing from, you know, the climate fund. It's not the time to be robbing from
it's
the
about
resilience
delivering
fund
better outcomes
to
no
make
matter where the
tax
funding
cuts.
comes from.
There is huge investment required, and we need to be positive about it. So leaning into, I mean, the rest of the world's decided, right? So Europe's phasing out petrol and diesel cars from 2030.
They've extended that. I think
No, that was England. No, the UK's an outlier now that it's not in the European
and so
community.
it'll follow them later.